Shilukik squished the dark liquor in her glass. The burning smell of alcohol filled her nostrils. She never was much of a drinker. However, it did help take the edge off in trying times. She took a long swig. With each passing moment, the weight of guilt bared down on her chest. Everything that had happened wasn't her fault. No one could have stopped the Veek. Not now, nor 20 years ago. She then wondered why she felt so guilty if it truly wasn't her fault. A soft knock at the door awoke her from the thought. It creaked open a moment later. Shilukik rubbed the tiredness from her eyes, before turning to see who had entered. Her brother slowly approached with a worried look on his face. Shilukik stopped and they met eyes. He spoke. "How are you feeling?" Shilukik sighed. "Do I really have to answer that?" Shilukik dropped his gaze to the floor. "I suppose not. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have asked." They stood in silence for a few moments, before Shilukik spoke again. "The humans that were in Quantum have returned safe." He stopped for a moment, almost fearing what he had to say next. "The ones in Iflond, their status is still unknown." Shilukik brought a hand to her temple. "Presumed dead or captured at this point?" Shilukik nodded softly. If they were truly dead, then all hopes of relations with the humans would be squandered. Perhaps it was carelessness. Perhaps it was a twist of fate, or maybe a bit of both. She thought that it wouldn't really matter. The result was still the same. The human factor was largely disregarded by the Council once word of the attack came in. They hadn't realized that the humans' reaction could sway the fate of Iflond in either direction. She couldn't blame them for their oversight, though. When it came to it, the Takar people came first. It wouldn't be long before the humans started asking questions about their missing envoy. The other envoy likely wouldn't be quiet about the attack either. Shilukik had to make a decision, right then and there. "What should we do?" Shilukik asked. "We must tell the truth of what happened, whether they'll believe it or not. We can't afford subtlety anymore. We haven't the time." "I know," Shilukik said grimly. "What of your husband? What does he think of this?" Shilukik ran a finger around the rim of her drink and thought. "Heldaka is too focused on organizing a defense in Iflond. He seems to think we can win the battle without human intervention. But I fear it's going to be a repeat of Chibus. This time we have little room to fall back." "We'll make it through, one way or the other." Shilukik looked at her brother and stood. She let herself fall into his arms, weeping softly. Shilukik wrapped his arms around his sister and gently rubbed her back. She knew it was a moment of weakness, but it felt so good to release some bottled-up emotions. They stood there in each other's arms for a few minutes. Slowly, Shilukik's sobbing died down. Shilukik finally broke the silence. "Do you remember that old dead tree back on the estate we grew up on?" Shilukik rested her head on her brother's shoulder. "Yeah. What about it?" "Remember how we were scared to death of it and would play a game about getting close to it? Do you know what I remember most about that game?" She pulled back and looked him in the eye. "What's that?" "I remember that you were the first one to actually touch it. You were always the brave one, and that's why I know that you're brave enough to lead us through this." Shilukik wiped a tear from her eye and went back into the embrace. "I miss the old times, when Mother and Father were still alive. I wonder what Mother would think of me now after everything that's happened." "She would be very proud of you. Despite all that's happened, we are still here. That's what really matters. This isn't the first hardship we've encountered, and it most definitely won't be the last." Shilukik finally broke from the hug and placed her glass down. She sighed. "I suppose I will have to write an official response on the missing humans. I want to present it personally." Her brother placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to. I will do it. I have much more experience with the humans. Besides, you don't even speak their language." "No, I must. It must come from me personally. Otherwise it wouldn't be sincere. Chalukik scrunched his brow. Then I will be there to translate. She shook her head. No. I need you here to act in my stead while I'm gone. What? But I can't run things. I'm just a scientist. A soft smile drew across her face. It will only be for a little while. Hartosh is already over there anyways. He will translate. I know you don't like this, but it must be done. Chalukik dropped his head for a moment before hugging his sister again. Be safe, all right? Promise me. She patted him on the back a few times and squeezed him tightly. I will. I promise. Chalukik stood in front of the portal, looking up at its size. It had been months since she last saw it, and it was much bigger than she remembered. She clung to her coat, fiddling with one of the buttons. Feeling nervous? Full Officer Orshok asked gently. He was there to act as her aide and bodyguard. He was a very experienced soldier and an officer, someone that Chalukik trusted greatly. Maybe a little. It's been a while, you know. Orshosh chuckled. Don't worry, ma'am. I'll be right next to you every step of the way. He patted his steam rifle confidently. Chalukik smiled before turning back to the portal. Well, no time like the present. She stepped forward and threw the blue hue. The change in temperature was always a bit disorienting, but the feeling soon passed. When she stepped outside, the compound was nothing like before. Soldiers, both human and Dakar, walked about their day. All of them kept a good distance from each other. Chalukik noticed that the humans stayed around large green tents, only seeming to leave the area when required. A structure she did not recognize stood near the human tents. It was tall and made up of a network of many metal poles. She approached cautiously towards the human encampment, Orshosh at her side. Chalukik was so entranced by the strange structure that she mistakenly bumped into one of the humans that was passing by. The human shouted something in his native tongue and looked up at her. The human stood his ground, possibly awaiting for a response. The human looked her up and down, then to Orshok. It muttered something before quickly scampering off. These humans don't know proper manners, I suppose, she said dejectedly. Well, I'm not sure that they even know who you are. They probably thought that you were just some commoner that is walking beyond their bounds. I wouldn't fault them. Chalukik huffed. Still, that seemed very impolite, but I digress. There really isn't much we can do about that without a translator. Speaking of which, where is that scout anyways? Orshosh shifted his pack on his shoulders a bit. I'm not sure. I thought he was supposed to meet us at the portal. Perhaps he's just late. Just as Orshosh said that, a figure donning a scout uniform turned a corner, running and panting heavily. The scout reached them in a few seconds and bowed deeply. Before he could get a word in, Chalukik spoke. You must be Hartosh, then. I presume you've been busy. Yes, Your Majesty. I am so sorry. This is my fault. I should have been more aware of the time. Chalukik waved a hand dismissively. No worries. Your work here is very important. I understand that you can't be everywhere at once. Please, right yourself and stand tall. Hartosh released his bow and looked up at the matriarch. When he did, she could see that his collar now bore 3 black X's, rather than the 2 he previously had. I see that you have received your promotion. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend. As you know, things on Frauenerth have been very chaotic as of late. Hartosh smiled and suppressed a chuckle. I suppose neither of us can make a set time, Your Majesty. Chalukik waved him off once again. Do not trouble yourself with proper courtesies. Any friend of my brother is a friend of mine. You may call me by my name if you wish. Hartosh nodded his head. Thank you, ma'am. It is an honor. He then once again bowed, to which Chalukik returned. Ortosh stepped forward and looked the scout in the eyes. I think that's enough of formalities. We have a job to do, and time is not on our hands. Ah, yes, of course, sir. The humans have already been briefed on the situation with Her Majesty. They are waiting in the communication tent. It is just this way. Follow me. Hartosh turned, leading them towards a tent that was near the large metal structure. The trio got many stares as they approached. Despite being on a Dakaran outpost, they were still outsiders in a way. Or maybe their appearance was just generally unpleasant to the humans. Dakar probably seemed exceedingly strange to them. Ignoring the looks, Shilukik stood tall. Appearances and first impressions were everything, especially now. Guarding the front was a sole human soldier with deep dark spots that hung under his eyes. He conversed with Harshok for a moment, before stepping to the side and holding the tent open. Inside the tent, it was relatively dimly lit by strange devices. A dark-skinned human sat at one of the devices that glowed green. The human looked at the trio as they entered. He said something to Harshok and waved them over. Hartosh turned to Shilukik and spoke. Go sit down over there next to that human. He will show you what to do. Shilukik confidently stepped forward and gave a polite bow. The human just gave a blank stare in return, and motioned for her to sit down. I suppose bowing isn't a common greeting for humans, she said to herself as she sat down. Hartosh stood behind them and waited patiently while the human began to go to work. He pressed a few buttons, then picked up a black object that was attached via a cord and held it up to his ear. A few moments later, he began talking to seemingly no one in particular. Shilukik gave the human a weird look. Had this human gone mad or something? After the human's seemingly one-sided conversation, he turned to Harshok and began to explain something. Hartosh nodded as he took in the information. Once the human was done speaking, Hartosh turned to Shilukik with a rough translation. So, what you're going to do is hold the phone to your ear like he was doing, and when you speak into it, you must press and hold down the button on the side. I've seen something similar to this when me and Shilukik are at the human base. I believe it allows you to talk to someone at long distances. She thought for a moment before replying. Well, that answers a few questions, I suppose. I doubt that you'll be able to explain how it works. It seems very complicated. Hartosh shook his head. No. Shilukik sighed before doing as she was told and grabbed the object, holding it to her ear. Finding the button with her fingers, she pressed down firmly and spoke. Hello? A staticky voice came from the phone and answered in her language. Hello, is this Shilukik? Yes it is. Who am I speaking to? I am Lance Corporal Johnson, but you can just call me John. It is nice to meet you, ma'am. I am here to interpret your message and pass it on to my superiors. Shilukik took a deep breath and thought for a moment. It is nice to meet you, John. Are you ready to receive the message? There was a brief silence before John came back over the phone. Send traffic when ready, ma'am. Right. I regret to inform you that one of the envoys that was sent over has gone missing when a city of ours was attacked. We do not know their current status, but they are presumed to be dead. We have not been completely honest with our situation. We are in a terrible war against a people called the Veek. They destroy our homes and kill our people ruthlessly. We are losing. Very badly. Shilukik waited for a response with bated breath. It took nearly a minute before John spoke again with the same calm voice. What can you tell me about these Veek, ma'am? They are very religious in their motivations, and are led by an emperor who has used this to wage a fanatical war against us. They will stop at nothing to exterminate my people, and will likely do the same to yours. For 20 years we have tried to defend ourselves from this unprovoked conflict. In an act of desperation, my brother Shilukik created a portal to your world, where we hope to seek refuge. That was before we knew of humanity. Another long pause followed. She guessed that John was writing all of this down. Could you describe the physical characteristics of the Veek for me? Yes, of course. They stand a bit shorter than the average Dakar. Their appearance is very reminiscent of the flying creatures of your world. However, they hide a nasty secret in their biology. They possess the natural ability to spit a highly corrosive acid, and are very skilled in close combat. Because of this, They have been extremely hard to fight despite a technological advantage from our soldiers. Our forces have been slowly whittled down through the years, and we now stand on the verge of extinction.
Thank you, ma'am. I think this is all the information I need for now. I do have one last question. This can be off the report if you like.
Please, do ask.
Why not come forward with this initially? Seems like you're in quite the tight spot.
We were afraid that you'd end up as another enemy if we showed our weakness. However, now we have no other choice but to come clean. I apologize deeply for all these lies and deceit. It has quite possibly caused the death of some of your people. I wish to take sole responsibility for this tragedy. All blame should be on me, not my people.
Shilukik almost began to tear up. Well, thank you very much for working with us today, ma'am. I will run this information up the chain and get a response to you soon enough. Over and out.
Goodbye, John. Over and out.
Hartosh lay in his bunk, thinking over the events of the day. His mind was filled with all kinds of possibilities of what was to come. The meeting of sorts had gone as well as it realistically could have. He was almost expecting some kind of anger or resentment from the humans once they heard about what had happened, but instead it seemed as though they had barely reacted at all, at least from what he could tell. The door to the barracks opened, and heavy footsteps approached his bed. He felt a hand touch his shoulder, which caused him to look over. It was his bunkmate. Sorry to wake you.
No problem at all. I wasn't really sleeping anyways. What is it?
Some humans were looking for you. They're just outside the door. Hartosh figured that he may as well do something, as he clearly wasn't going to get any rest. He hopped down and walked over to the door. Looking outside, he saw a pair of humans looking up at him in the dim evening light.
You wanted to speak with me?
Hartosh asked in the human tongue. Yes, well, kind of. Just follow me. We need you for something, one of the humans said. Hartosh shrugged and let the human lead him off to wherever he was needed. The same human who spoke earlier turned to him as they walked. You probably don't recognize me, but we've met a few times in the past. I was with the group that gave you that beef jerky way back when. My name is Campos, and this here is Tyr. The memory of the seasoned meat rushed into Hartosh's mind. It was his first exposure to human food, and it certainly didn't disappoint. His mouth began to salivate at the thought.
I do remember that event very well. I would pay good money to get more of that stuff. What did you call it? Beef jerky?
Campos chuckled. Well, we can get you more of that if you want. Hartosh licked his lips.
That would be great if it isn't too much trouble.
They turned, and Hartosh noticed that they were walking towards one of the large human tents. Tyr stepped ahead and swung one of the flaps open. A wave of heat hit Hartosh.
These humans certainly like the warmth, he thought to himself.
Before they entered, Campos turned to him. We were doing something special tonight and figured that you might enjoy some downtime, so we decided to invite you.
Hartosh gave a smile. Thank you, that is very kind.
Well, come in, come in. Campos waved him into the tent. Inside, there were several more humans, all sitting in a circle having a conversation. Each of them had some kind of drink in their hand. Once all three of them had been noticed, a bunch of shouts and cheers came from the group. One of the taller humans stood and approached Hartosh. He put a drink in his hand and pulled him towards a chair. Welcome! Have a drink and relax. I bet you've never drank with Marines before. Hartosh looked at the human blankly.
What's a Marine?
A cacophony of laughter and shouts filled the tent. It was as if he had just told the greatest joke of all time. Campos patted him on the shoulder. You are about to find out, friend. Hartosh took a sip from the cup. The dark liquid burned all the way down. It made him shiver, and his skin felt hot in the already warm tent. Thoughts about the day went through his head once more, and a question formed. Had they not heard of what happened to their comrades on Tharin Earth? He looked over to Campos.
Why are you having this party? You do know what happened today, right?
Campos smirked and took a long drink before answering. Yes, of course. This is the whole reason we're doing this. Hartosh was flabbergasted. They celebrate when their own dies in battle? But that doesn't make any sense. Shouldn't you be mourning or something? At least show some remorse. Tyr looked Harstock in the eye with a serious expression, a stark contrast to his joyous demeanour just moments ago. If you're implying that we don't care about what happened to our brothers, then you are sorely mistaken, friend. This is how we remember them, and their deaths can only mean one thing for us. Hartosh's throat went dry, and his hair stood up on end. What is that? Tyr shot up to his feet and raised his cup high. It means we're going to war! Every human in that tent replicated Tyr's gesture and began shouting incoherently. Hartosh was seriously regretting getting out of bed.